Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumber here again for JoBlo.com with another edition of James Bond Revisited. And this time we're going to do something really cool. We're going to count down the top 10 ever best James Bond girls. Yes, that's right, all the Bond girls coming right up. But before we get to the list, let me just say one thing. We are not including villainesses because they were already on the James Bond villain list, including of course Famke Janssen's Xenia Onatopp, who most certainly would have made this list if she hadn't already been included in the villains list, and well, nobody gets onto the list twice. So without further ado, kicking off the best ever James Bond girls with number 10, who's probably going to be a bit of a controversial choice, but it's Carol Bouquet as Melina Havelock in For Your Eyes Only. Now, something interesting started to happen with Roger Moore as he got older. And one of the things about him is that he was in his mid-50s already by the time he made Moonraker, and by the time he made For Your Eyes Only, he was about 54 years old. He wasn't a young guy. So what they started to do was they started to tone down his randiness a little bit. And if you watch For Your Eyes Only, he's actually pretty mature in this film. He doesn't jump into bed with every Bond girl he sees. Lynn Holly-Johnson's character, who's in her 20s and a skater, tries to seduce him, and of course he tells her he's just going to buy her some ice cream instead.
I don't think your Uncle Harry would approve.
Him? He thinks I'm still a virgin.
Yes, well, you get your clothes on. I'll buy you an ice cream.
He does sleep with Cassandra Harris's Countess von Liesel and Carol Bouquet's Melina, but of course Melina is the main James Bond girl in this film, and Bond never really pursues her romantically until kind of the end of the film, because you see, her parents have been killed and she wants revenge. In this movie, she's in kind of a fragile emotional state, and I think that Bond realizes this and tones down the womanizing a little bit. It's an interesting thing to note because at the beginning of the movie, he visits the grave of his late wife. In the Roger Moore Bond movies, they would acknowledge the fact that, On Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby actually did happen, and that Bond suffers from the fact that he's a widow. So in this film, he's kind of already in that darker frame of mind. And of course, it is a much darker James Bond film than a lot of the other Roger Moore films, with him killing hitmen in cold blood and so on and so forth. But I think that Carol Bouquet is really good as Melina, even though she's dubbed. And I have to say, some of her action scenes are quite good, such as the beginning of the film where she kills the assassin that murdered her parents. It's pretty badass, and I love her weapon, the crossbow.
For your eyes only, darling.
Number 9 is Isabella Scorupco's Natalia Simonova, a programmer at the Severnaya lab who survives the GoldenEye attack on the control center and ends up being kind of the default Bond girl. For most of the movie, her and Pierce Brosnan keep it kind of low-key. She's supposed to be kind of this mousy lab technician. Of course, they get to Cuba, she wears a bikini, she looks unbelievably hot, they have sex. I mean, it's a James Bond movie after all, right? I don't know many computer programmers that look like Isabella Scorupco, but I always thought that she was quite good in this film, and she kind of saves the day at the end of the movie with her knowledge of programming. Of course, she does get overshadowed a little bit by Famke Janssen's Xenia Onatopp, but I think she holds her own, especially towards the end of the movie, where she tries to fight off Famke Janssen and has that great moment where Famke kind of takes her and says, "Wait for your turn," which when I was a kid, I thought was really cool. She's the primary Bond girl in this movie, and she's a really good one.
Boris! Boris!
What?
Coming in at number 8, another controversial choice, Sophie Marceau as Electra King. Now, this is kind of the first Pierce Brosnan James Bond movie where you can see he gets emotionally involved with a woman, and of course, Electra King is kind of loosely based on Patty Hearst. She's been kidnapped, she's been turned over to the side of the villains, and of course is fragile and flawed. In some ways, she kind of ends up becoming the main villain in this movie, although not technically, I guess, it's still Renard. But I always thought that Marceau was amazing in this film, and I really like the chemistry that she had with Pierce Brosnan. You feel in the movie that he's actually falling in love with her. The biggest mistake they made, of course, was when she eventually kind of betrays Bond. Bond just immediately jumps into bed with Denise Richards, Dr. Christmas Jones, who, of course, is beautiful, but is a terrible character and probably one of the worst Bond girls ever in terms of a storyline or premise. So it kind of ruins the impact that relationship had. But on the whole, I have to say Sophie Marceau is terrific in this movie, and of course looks great too.
You're determined to protect me, aren't you?
Perhaps from yourself. You don't have to do this.
There's no point in living if you can't feel alive.
Number 7 is one that not everybody's going to agree with me on, but Maud Adams as Octopussy. Now, as I said, Roger Moore was getting a little bit long in the tooth by the time he made some of his later James Bond movies, but I really like the fact that they kind of acknowledge it. You know, there's nothing wrong with James Bond being in his 50s or even in his 60s as long as you kind of adjust the formula a little bit. So in this movie, he got a love interest that was at least a little bit closer to his age than normal, with Maud Adams at the time, I think, being around 39. She's terrific as kind of this kingpin on her own. She runs a team of gorgeous smugglers working for the circus, and she has really good chemistry with Roger Moore, and I especially like the fact that kind of her whole premise is taken right out of the Ian Fleming novels, where her father was a secret agent that betrayed the government and was offered an honorable suicide by James Bond, and instead of wanting revenge, she kind of wants to jump his bones, right? I always thought that Maud Adams seemed to kind of have a thing for Roger Moore, and it comes across in this film. The two of them have terrific chemistry together, and it's no surprise that Maud Adams is really the only James Bond girl to be in 2 movies as 2 separate characters. Pretty cool.
I wondered when you might arrive.
So you are the mysterious Octopussy.
And you are James Bond.
Number 6 is Barbara Bach as Major Anya Amasova, aka Triple X. Now, this was the first James Bond movie where you got Bond paired up with another secret agent, or at least a Bond girl that was kind of on an even keel. You see, the thing is, she's a badass in her own right and an amazing agent. She's the top agent of the Soviet Union, and her and Bond have kind of this interesting little cat and mouse game that they're doing early in the film. Of course, you know, they immediately decide to work together and things go a lot better as she becomes an ally, but then they throw an interesting wrinkle in. The fact is, her lover was actually killed by James Bond in a mission in the teaser, and then she decides that after the mission's over, she's going to kill James Bond.
The answer to the question is yes. I did get him.
Then, when this mission is over, I will kill you.
Now, Barbara Bach's acting in this movie is a little bit wooden, but I actually think it kind of works for this repressed Soviet character. And I have to say, the first time I watched the movie, I wasn't so sure that she was just going to immediately melt into James Bond's arms at the end of the movie, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, it's a James Bond movie. I figured she wasn't going to kill him, but she does seem pretty angry with him, and towards the end, you know, you really don't know what's going to happen. I always thought that she was a great character and probably should have been brought back, but alas, they weren't really doing that back then. I have to think that if Anya Amasova was a character nowadays, she'd probably get her own spin-off franchise or at least become a recurring character. But things are done a little bit differently now than they were back in 1977.
007, Triple X. Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, sir.
Number 5 is the original James Bond girl, Ursula Andress. Now, Honey Rider is definitely not the most intriguing James Bond girl ever. I mean, she's kind of childlike and kind of thinly written, but my god, that scene where Ursula Andress emerges on the beach in the white bikini with the knife is just one of the most iconic sequences in cinema history, and for that alone, you really got to put her on this list. Again, Honey's barely in the movie. She really becomes a big presence in the plot in the last half hour, and it's a very thinly written character, and not very well dubbed either. That's not Ursula Andress' actual voice. But, you know, the visual aspect alone and the fact that she's so iconic, she really needs to be on the list.
Are you alone?
What are you doing here? Looking for shells?
No, I'm just looking.
Number 4, a more modern Bond girl, Halle Berry as Jinx, who actually almost got her own spin-off in a movie that was going to be directed by Stephen Frears. Alas, a little movie called Catwoman came along and kind of ruined Halle Berry's career as an action star for a little while at least. Now, Die Another Day is probably the worst James Bond movie ever made, but Halle Berry had just won an Oscar and really is giving it her all, and I think that had she been allowed to make an action movie, this would have been the thing that would have kind of launched her, as opposed to something like Catwoman. I mean, you have to wonder, if she chose Catwoman over doing Jinx, there was a problem there, but I don't think that actually was the case at all. I think things just kind of fell apart, unfortunately. Jinx is a great character. Halle Berry looks amazing in her orange bikini, which of course pays tribute to the James Bond girl that we just mentioned, Ursula Andress. I also have to mention that Rosamund Pike in this film is absolutely gorgeous as Miranda Frost, but of course she's a villainess and not a true James Bond girl.
I take it Mr. Bond's been explaining his Big Bang Theory.
Oh, yeah, I think I got the thrust of it.
Number 3 is probably the most important James Bond girl of all time, Diana Rigg as Countessa Tracy DiVincenzo, aka Mrs. James Bond, for a little while anyway. Now, you see, in 1969, George Lazenby was taking over the role of James Bond and was a complete unknown. So for the Bond girl, they wanted a big star. Brigitte Bardot was apparently originally approached, didn't work out, but they went with Diana Rigg, who was very famous at the time for playing Emma Peel on The Avengers, who was kind of like the female James Bond. In the movie, she plays the one woman that James Bond ever truly falls in love with, and they get married, and I think that Diana Rigg is terrific in this movie. One thing that's kind of cool is, considering how physically able she was and capable, they did give her some fight scenes towards the end of the movie, which are pretty nifty. Again, this movie ends every time I want Tracy to get away, but she always ends up dying. It just is what it is.
There's no hurry, you see. We have all the time in the world.
Number 2 is kind of an off-kilter choice, but I gotta say, I've always had a thing for Carrie Lowell as Pam Bouvier in License to Kill, one of my favorite James Bond movies ever that I think a lot of people just ignore. So this is another Bond girl who's probably as badass or even more so than James Bond is in this movie. I mean, she gets the best kill throwing Benicio del Toro down the coke shredder, which is just completely insane and cold-blooded, and my god, is she ever beautiful. I thought she looked good in this movie at the beginning when you first see her, but man, there's a part in the movie where they reveal her with short hair and impeccably tailored. It's a jaw-dropping moment, and you see like Timothy Dalton's double take when he sees how good she looks with the short hair, and it's hilarious because, man, could Carrie Lowell ever pull off that hairdo? She's really great in this movie. I love the character, I love her in the role, and I'm surprised that she didn't go on to have a much bigger career on the big screen, although of course she was on Law & Order for quite a while afterwards. And Richard Gere got to marry her, for a while anyway. What a lucky guy.
You lucky bastard.
And number 1 is probably my favorite James Bond girl of all time, and another one that I would say is very important to the character. Vesper Lynd Eva Green in Casino Royale.
Perfection.
Now, Eva Green is the whole package in this movie. I mean, look at her. She's absolutely gorgeous, but Vesper Lynd is such a great character. Much more interesting than she is on the page in Ian Fleming's original novel. You see, she's somebody that had a lover who betrayed her and now has to betray James Bond, and she's a really tortured character in the film. She's very three-dimensional. You can see her actually falling in love with James Bond throughout the movie, and James Bond is falling in love with her too. She's there for him after his, private parts have essentially been, deactivated to a certain extent by Le Chiffre, but she's the one who gives him back his virility and his potency, so there you go. If anyone could do it. I do love her in this movie. I think she gives the character a real tragic edge that makes the ending of the movie kind of devastating, especially when he tells M,
"Why should I need more time? Job's done. The bitch is dead."
I mean, what a cold-blooded line, but Eva Green is so good in this movie. Again, I don't understand why Eva Green isn't one of the biggest stars in the world, because she's got it all.
You've got your armor back on. How's that?
I have no armor left. You stripped it from me.
So that's my list of the 10 greatest James Bond girls of all time. I've probably left some of your favorites off this list, so make sure to tell me in the talkbacks who your top 10s would have been. There are a lot that almost made my list, but for one reason or another, just didn't. We'll be back again pretty soon with another installment of James Bond Revisited, and if you like this kind of thing, make sure to click on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.